I'd like to make one brief change to the program. I'm not a Moraga father, I'm a Orinda father, which is meaningful to no one, except people who live in Orinda.
You want to lift that up a little bit?
I'm not as tall anymore.
Moraga, Orinda, Lafayette.
Exactly. We're on the filtering side of the tunnel, if you know what I'm talking about. It's weird to look at this group because I don't think anybody here has a child that is old enough to be 8 years old. Anybody? I'm the only one. Okay, good. But we've all been 8 years old at one time or another. As an 8-year-old child, as a dad to a child, I can tell you that I thought I'd be teaching a lot, and it turns out you learn a lot. I'd like to take you back to when my son was 8 years old, and one of the things we learned when he was 8 years old is that you don't take him to a nice restaurant. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and we decided we'd go to get his picture with Santa Claus and then go shopping, and then take him to Morton's in the city, which is very expensive. And we're all dressed up and trying to have a great time. We try to have a conversation, but he's too busy playing with those Pokemon cards. You know what I'm talking about? Do they even have Pokemon cards anymore? I don't know. We got rid of all of his. It's not because of that night, because that night as I was watching him play with those cards, I thought back to a deck of cards that I had when I was 8 years old. It was 1966, and it was the only gift I remember receiving that year for Christmas. Not because it was the only thing I got that year. We were always made a big deal about Christmas, but it happened to be in my pocket when we went to visit my father in the hospital. My brother John was 10, my brother Jim was 9, and I was 8. We hadn't seen our dad since the day after Thanksgiving because he'd gone into the hospital and he hadn't come home yet. So my mother arranged to have my grandfather pick us up after school in the early release and take us to St. Joseph's Hospital at the corner of Belmont and Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, overlooking the lake. It's a beautiful facility. If you've ever seen the movie Brian's Song, it's the hospital they use in Brian's Song. Somebody's in it. I saw it too. So my grandfather drives up to the front door and he lets us out the back seat of his big giant Plymouth and he says, "Go in the lobby, take the elevator to the 6th floor, and when you get there, your mom will be there to meet you. I'll wait down here in the lobby after I park the car, and I'll see you after you see your dad." So we go up to the 6th floor, and sure enough, there's my mother. She's all dressed up. She was a Chicago public school teacher, and in those days, school teachers had to dress up to go to work, and so she was looking terrific, and she said, "Come on in," and brought us to the visitors area, which was a glass-enclosed room overlooking the nurse's station in the hallway beyond. It was dominated by an enormous circular white Formica coffee table with ashtrays inset all around the periphery. They were all filled with cigarette Chesterfield butts with red lipstick. That was my mom, so I knew she spent a lot of time there. And the table was surrounded by these orange naugahyde and chrome couches. So she sits us down on one of the couches and says, "Wait here, I'll go get your dad." So we sit on the couch, and I'm looking out the window, and we're looking out over the nurse's station, and I was extremely uncomfortable because I'd never been in a hospital before, and all these people were looking at us, these 3 little boys lined up on a couch. So I got kind of fidgety, and I reached in my pocket, and I found a deck of old maid cards that I had received as a secret Santa present from Patsy Field. It hadn't even been opened yet. So I took the cellophane off and I looked at the cards, and instantly I was fascinated because instead of normal playing cards, what we had were these cartoons of boys and girls doing things that boys and girls dream about doing, like flying kites and driving race cars and stuff like that. So they were absolutely fascinating to me, and I'm looking at these cards, and then I look up and I notice my mom and dad walking towards us down the hall. And I was mortified because my dad, who was always a very careful dresser, is walking down the hall in a seersucker bathrobe, a hospital gown, and paper slippers. And And they walk into the room and they sit down on the couch across from us. And my mom says, "Come on over and give your dad a hug and a kiss." And we all line up and take our turns giving him a hug and a kiss. And then we return to the couch and sit and look at him. And my mother makes a strategic error at that point. She says, "So tell your dad everything that's gone on for the last month." Well, if you're looking for a way to shut up three little boys, the best thing to ask him is, what's been going on for the last month? Because you have no concept of time whatsoever. Nothing in your life is that important, unless somebody passed a sandwich through their nose or something at lunch. That's about the only thing I can think of that's worth talking about at that age. My brothers are trying to have a conversation with my dad, but I don't even try. I just go back to my cards, and I'm playing with these cards, and it really upsets my mom. She starts out pretty nicely. She says, "Can you please put the cards away? You haven't seen your dad in a month." And went through several iterations until we get to put the cards away now. But I didn't. Because they were comforting me. I was very uncomfortable in that situation, as you can imagine. And besides, every time I looked at my dad, he was smiling. So I kept playing with these cards until my mother gets fed up, and she says, "That's it. Your dad has to go back to his room. You wait here. I'll be right back." Apparently you have a mom like mine. Because I knew I was in a peck of trouble at that point. And these cards suddenly were not fascinating at all. So I put them in the box, and I put the box back in my pocket, and I sat very politely with my hands folded in my lap, waiting for her return. Several minutes later, she came back. She says, "Come on, boys, I'll take you downstairs, and Grandpa will take you home." As we walk by her one by one, I'm last in line because I'm the youngest, and I'm always last in line. She grabs me by the shoulder and escorts me to the elevator. And when we get there, she punches the down button. Doesn't even ask me to do it. And you know how you live. She punches the elevator down button, and when the elevator comes, nobody's on it, and she shoves me back to the elevator. Not hard. It wasn't child abuse or anything, but it wasn't like I wasn't going to get on that elevator. And she gets on, punches the one button, stands on one side of me, and my brothers stand as far away from her as she can on the other side. And we all watch silently the numbers above the door as we descend. 5, 4, 3, 2. And then just before we get to the first floor, just before those doors open, she looks at me and she says through clenched teeth, "He even shaved for you." Isn't that the silliest thing you ever heard? He even shaved for you. Of course he shaved. He shaved every day. But that comment haunted me for 35 years. I thought about it almost every day of my life until that night, the day after Thanksgiving, when my son was 8, and I watched him play with those Pokemon cards. Because for the first time I was able to forgive myself. I had done nothing wrong. That's just how 8-year-old boys behave. But more than that, I was able to forgive all the adults in my life. Because for 35 years, I've been blaming them. Because I thought somebody should have explained it to me. What was going on here? But nobody did. I was able to forgive them at that moment. Because when I looked at my boy, I recognized that there's no way to look into his eyes and explain to him that he's seeing his father for the very last time.